Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
And we're going to talk about, we've covered it before, climate change. What exactly is climate change?
Well, this is it. The Green Party and a lot of people now are spending an inordinate amount of time talking about trying to create an environment that will be kind to the environment. They want to ban cars and introduce electric cars, which is actually more pollutant than the cars that are already here. They want to close down any site that is produced by oil or coal or this and that kind of thing. And they spent an inordinate amount of time as if they can do anything about the climate. It is ludicrous to think that human beings can do anything about the climate. They can certainly do something about the pollution, and but they don't talk about that for some reason. The plastic mountain should be dealt with, and the monopolies in the food trade and in the other trades, that plastic should be avoided, and whatever way they distribute their goods, it shouldn't involve a mountain of plastic which is infecting rivers, lakes and the sea even. And so that's what the problem is. That's to deal with. I'll just give an example of what a writer has described as the fantasy world of climate change science. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of scientists dispute what they talk about. We should certainly do what is reasonable to protect our environment, but the climate change agenda is a different matter. Climate change has been occurring since the third day of creation, and human beings have always impacted their environment in different ways. However, the idea that the climate is some political agenda, like educational or economical policy, which governments and scientists can control in anything approaching the precise manner that they would have you believe is possible, is nothing short of fantasy. They might learn from King Canute. Did you ever hear of King Canute?
Who is King Canute?
Well, he was a king. He brought his symptomatic courtiers down to the shore and ordered the tide to stop coming in. His aim was to show them that God, not he, governed nature. Stopping the tide would have been a tiny achievement compared with today's extraordinary belief that we can control our global climate in a very specific way. Modern science is under threat from its involvement with capitalism and vast corporate interests. One issue after issue, COVID, abortion, contraception, overpopulation, these interests exaggerate, manipulate, contradict, minimise or suppress scientific findings to suit their own agenda and profits.
Yes.
Now, climate change is now a multi-billion-dollar industry driven in large part by big tech. How much of what we're told can we trust or even understand? Now, this is an article in a magazine. Modern science is founded on the Christian understanding of God and on Christian morality, including love of truth. It is already crumbling due to the growing rejection of Christian metaphysics and morality. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a short article written by Father Brian McDevitt. The attempts by politicians, media giants and global agencies to stifle debate about the causes of climate change is also undermining science. What do they not want us to know? There is not one global climate, rather hundreds of local climates relate to each other in immensely complex ways. If for a moment we imagine some fantasy world where human beings could have a significant effect on climate, how would they decide what results were best? and who would make the decisions? Would Ireland and Iceland, for example, have the same climate needs, or Australia and Ethiopia? Back in the real world, we need to ask whose financial, political, economical, social interests are being served to present climate policies, grants, taxes, etc., and whose are being damaged. Concern with climate change has really become a pseudo-religion for many people. Having rejected God, they need some cause to give meaning to their empty lives. There are vast complexities involved on every level, and much of the science that is readily contestable is given an interpretation that is marked as irrefutable. On such a quagmire of an issue, one can certainly question the wisdom of the Church, who has little competence in such matters, leaping aboard the bus of popular opinion. Yet recently Irish Church leaders welcomed, inverted commas, the government's Climate Action Bill, inverted commas, with its emphasis on the importance of effecting a just transition. Whatever the jargon may mean, or on what basis were they passing judgment on this bill, or were they or Trócaire even involved in this issue? The bishops are now exploring how the Church in Ireland, inverted commas, starting at parish level, may promote, inverted commas, actions on climate change in accordance with the social teaching of the Church. Given the appalling condition of the faith in our country, would the Church not be far better employed using its limited time, personnel and financial resources on the work of evangelisation, focused on the salvation of truth? Truth.
Yes.
It's a very strange business with the climate agenda that the word truth escapes their complete ignorance.
Well, we covered the climate before. I remember we were saying that now that it's coming up to Christmas, it's quite appropriate. From 2021, there won't be chimneys on houses. So you can see it going around Dublin City, any new house has no chimney. And it kind of looks like, I describe it as a rabbit with no ears. Okay?
That's as good a description as I've ever heard.
Yeah, and but the problem with that is, of course, it ruins the story of Santa, which is basically, I mean, Santa generally comes down the chimney.
That's what we were taught as kids, and we were often started saying, I used to wonder how we get down. I said, he must be able to change himself. He must be God.
This is the thing. But now, of course, Santa can't get down any chimney because there's no chimney for him to go down. So
how was children going to sort of believe in Santa and Santa being promoted? Because Santa was supposed to be Saint Nicholas.
Yeah.
And it's based on that. And but it's the fact that they're carrying it to that extent. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done enough. They never seem to be satisfied with what they've achieved so far. I've been around this country. The marvels of nature, the marvellous scenery, what God has produced, the beauty of the country is something that I've just admired as I've been going around, particularly down in Munster, Kerry and Cork. It's just worth exploring. I'd advise anyone in this country or anywhere throughout the world to visit this country and see the marvellous scenery and what's been presented. It's great. And when you look at it and then think that there's a political agenda about climate and interfering with cows as they graze in the field, what a tranquil sight. We spoke about this before, but we have to speak about it again because this crowd is losing all credibility. We're now faced in this country, believe it or not, with so-called electrical shortages for domestic people and Irish people living in the country. After going through this COVID for the last 2 years, here we are now presented with this. And why is it happening? Because they've closed the famous power station down in Moneymore in County Clare or wherever it is, which produced a lot of electricity, but I think it was using coal or maybe oil or whatever it's using, about the greens. Yapping about the environment. As you go around the country, I can't see any evidence of any pollution whatsoever, except what we spoke about before, the plastic mountain, and the fact that effluent is going into rivers They should never be going into rivers.
Look, the thing about the climate change, we spoke about it before, and we were saying CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, right, has been the biggest polluter, like in Ireland, with pesticides. You got slurry from the farms.
The slurry going into the rivers,
into the wells. When I was a child going to school, you could put your cup into a well and you could drink straight out of it.
Oh, I did it many a time.
If you did that now, you would die.
Because there's
pesticides, herbicides, there's slurry, there's everything. But go back for a second, John, the climate change for a second. So if you go back through the newspaper cuttings back as far as 1920, right?
Yes.
There was people in the 1920s, profit-driven people, scaring people about climate change. If you right up to the 70s, if you go back to the oil crisis, I think it was the Iranian oil crisis, I think it was in the early 1970s. What they were saying was the oil companies, I think, were telling people that the whole world is going to be an Antarctic. Okay, we're all going to freeze to death. There's going to be an ice sheet all over the whole world, and this went right through the 70s. Okay,
yeah, exactly, it was coming.
Then in the 1980s, they changed the narrative and they said that there's a huge hole now in the ozone. Okay,
that's right.
And suddenly that disappeared by itself. Starting in the early 2000s, you had the climate change, and it's still going on, and it's 20 years later. You know, so it is profit driven.
It's a false notion. But there's people that apparently we call them the people that. They're the elite, but absolutely know nothing. This is why Jesus, when he was on this earth, he didn't appoint experts, he appointed simple fishermen to be the apostles. And look at the great job they did.
Absolutely. But the thing
and that's an example.
Yeah. Truth. If you look at like practical things, the River Liffey, everybody thinks in Dublin, right, that the River Liffey is a dirty river. But the River Liffey, of course, is only polluted when it gets into the city. Correct. And all the pollution goes into it from all the toilets in the city. Okay, so practical measures: get rid of the pollution first before you start tackling climate change. I suppose is the answer.
So really. Forget about the climate change. Just deal with the issues that affect it. The plastic mountain that multiple supermarkets produce. If you go in and get your groceries, half the stuff or 3/4 of the stuff, there's plastic around it. I fill bags with plastic because I don't have lorries calling to my house. I bring it to the recycling. I bring all that in maybe every 6 weeks or thereabouts because it's not a family where I am. I'm just myself. But you still have this plastic when you buy stuff. So if they stopped that or else made it that it was degradable, surely if they can go to the moon and this, that and the other, they can produce something that's degradable, because no point in using all this plastic. We didn't have this problem years ago before the arrival of these monopolies. And this is where, but they're not saying anything about that. So like the truth seems to escape them. It's the pollution of the plastic is the problem, and the pollution then in the agricultural sector with stuff going into rivers and streams and destroying the fish, which was a great amenity and attracted tourists.
I think, John Malone, I'll go and put down a coal fire right now.
I'm glad you have a chimney, because I have a chimney, and by goodness I have coal in the shed, and that's going to be hopping into it. Well, once I see this crowd with this old racket, they can take a good jump for themselves and perhaps jump into the Liffey when it's polluted.
Oh shit. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye now.
We have to